The morning fog rolled thick and heavy through the streets of Millbrook, Massachusetts, casting the quaint New England town in an ethereal glow. Emma Patterson stood at the window of her bakery, Sweet Memories, watching as the first hints of sunrise painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold. At 68, she had owned this establishment for over 3 decades, and every morning brought the same comfortable routine that had become as natural as breathing. Her weathered hands worked methodically as she prepared for another day, measuring flour, sugar, and butter with the precision that came from years of experience. The familiar scent of vanilla and warm yeast filled the air, a constant reminder of why she had never given up on her dream, even when times were tough. But lately, something felt different. Perhaps it was the approaching anniversary of that day, the day she lost everything she held dear. 35 years had passed, yet the weight of guilt and regret still sat heavy in her chest, especially during the quiet moments before dawn. A movement outside caught her eye. Through the foggy window, she spotted a dark shape moving slowly along the sidewalk. As it came closer, Emma's heart clenched. It was a dog, old, by the looks of it, with matted gray fur and a pronounced limp. The poor creature was painfully thin, its ribs visible even through the thick coat. It stopped near her dumpster, nose twitching at the scents wafting from the morning's first batch of pastries. Emma watched as the dog carefully sniffed around the base of the dumpster, searching for any morsel of food. There was something about its movements, something achingly familiar that stirred long-buried memories. The way it held its head, slightly tilted to the left, reminded her so much of. "No," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. "Don't go there, Emma." But the memories came anyway, unbidden and sharp as ever. Charlie, her beloved golden retriever mix, lost so many years ago in circumstances that still haunted her dreams. She had been young then, just starting out with her first bakery in Boston, struggling to make ends meet while caring for her dying mother. Charlie had been her constant companion, her source of comfort through those dark days. Until that terrible night in December, when everything went wrong. Emma pushed the thoughts away and focused on the dog outside. Whatever its story, she couldn't bear to see it suffering. She grabbed a fresh croissant from the cooling rack and headed to the back door, her arthritis-stiffened joints protesting the early morning chill. "Here, boy," she called softly, crouching down despite her aching knees. "Or girl. Come on, it's all right." The dog froze, ears perking up at her voice. For a moment, their eyes met through the fog, and Emma felt a jolt of recognition so strong it nearly knocked her over. Those eyes, a unique amber color she had only seen once before, stared back at her with an intelligence that seemed impossible. But before she could process what she was seeing, the dog turned and limped away, disappearing into the mist as quickly as it had appeared. Emma stood there for a long moment, the croissant forgotten in her trembling hand. It couldn't be. Charlie would be long gone by now. Dogs didn't live that long. Yet something about this encounter had shaken her to her core. Throughout the day, as she served her regular customers and chatted with the locals, Emma's mind kept drifting back to the dog. Mrs. Henderson, who had been coming in for her morning scone for 20 years, noticed her distraction. "Everything all right, dear?" the elderly woman asked, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. "You seem a million miles away today." Emma managed a smile. "Just thinking about the past, Margaret. Say, have you seen a stray dog around town lately? Gray fur, kind of old?" Mrs. Henderson's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, you mean Old Soul? That's what the kids have been calling him. He showed up about a month ago. No one knows where he came from, but he's been wandering around, mostly keeping to himself. Poor thing won't let anyone get close enough to help." "Old Soul," Emma repeated softly. The name fits somehow. "Has anyone tried to catch him?" "The shelter folks have tried, but he's too clever. Always manages to slip away just when they think they've got him. Some say he's looking for something, or someone." Mrs. Henderson paused, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "You know, it's the strangest thing. Jenny at the shelter swears he only started appearing around here after they put up that article about you in the local paper last month." Emma's hand stilled in the process of wrapping up Mrs. Henderson's scone. The article, a feature piece about local businesses that had stood the test of time. They had included an old photograph of her and Charlie from the early days of her first bakery in Boston. That's quite a coincidence," she managed to say, but her mind was racing. After Mrs. Henderson left, Emma found herself pulling out the old shoebox she kept under her desk in the back office. Inside were photographs, carefully preserved despite their age. Her fingers trembled as she lifted out one in particular, a Polaroid taken just days before Charlie disappeared. In it, a much younger Emma stood proudly in front of her first tiny bakery, arm around a beautiful golden retriever mix with distinctive amber eyes. The same eyes she had seen this morning. "It's impossible," she whispered to herself. But was it? She had heard stories of dogs traveling incredible distances to find their way home, of bonds that defied explanation. But after 35 years? That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The memories she had kept locked away for so long came flooding back. The night Charlie disappeared had been during one of the worst snowstorms Boston had seen in decades. She had been closing up the bakery, exhausted from another long day of trying to keep her fledgling business afloat, while spending every spare moment at her mother's hospital bedside. Charlie had been acting strange all day, restless and whining at the door. When Emma had opened it to take out the trash, he had bolted, something he had never done before. She had called and searched for hours in the blinding snow until hypothermia had forced her to give up. The next day, she had posted flyers, called shelters, done everything she could think of, but Charlie had vanished without a trace. 2 weeks later, her mother passed away. Overwhelmed by grief and guilt, Emma had sold the Boston bakery and moved to Millbrook for a fresh start. She had never forgiven herself for not searching longer, for not doing more to find her faithful companion. The next morning, Emma arrived at the bakery earlier than usual. She set up a bowl of fresh water and some leftover roast beef by the back door, then waited. Hours passed with no sign of the mysterious dog. She was beginning to think she had imagined the whole thing when she heard a soft scratching at the door. There he was, the gray dog, looking even more worn and tired in the clear morning light. Up close, she could see the white around his muzzle, the cataracts beginning to cloud those remarkable amber eyes. But there was something else too, a small scar above his right eye, barely visible through the gray fur. Charlie had had the same scar, from an accident with the screen door when he was a puppy. "Charlie?" Emma whispered, hardly daring to breathe. Is it really you?" The dog's ears twitched at the name. He took a hesitant step forward, nose working overtime as he caught her scent. Then, slowly, his tail began to wag. Emma sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God! Oh my Charlie!" What happened next would be talked about in Millbrook for years to come. The old dog, who had kept his distance from everyone for weeks, suddenly crossed the space between them and pressed his head into Emma's lap. The sound he made was somewhere between a whimper and a cry, as if 35 years of longing were being released at once. Emma wrapped her arms around him, not caring about the dirt and matted fur. She could feel every rib, every knot of tension in his tired body. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry I lost you." They stayed like that for what seemed like hours, an old woman and an even older dog, reconnecting across decades of separation. When Emma finally pulled back to look at him properly, she saw that his tail hadn't stopped wagging. "Come on," she said softly, wiping her eyes. "Let's get you inside and cleaned up. You must be starving." Charlie followed her into the bakery with barely a hesitation, as if he had been waiting for this invitation his whole life. Emma closed early that day, something she had never done before, and devoted herself to caring for her long-lost friend. The local vet, Dr. Sarah Chin, came by as soon as Emma called and explained the situation. After a thorough examination, she sat back with a look of amazement on her face. "Well, he's definitely old, probably around 15 or 16, which is remarkable for a dog his size. But here's the thing, Emma. This can't be your original Charlie. The timeline doesn't work. Dogs just don't live that long." Emma nodded slowly, running her hands through Charlie's now clean fur. The bath had revealed more familiar markings, but Dr. Chen was right. This couldn't be the same dog. Then how do you explain? Dr. Chen shook her head. The markings, the scar, the eyes, they're incredibly similar to your photos. My best guess? This is Charlie's grandson, maybe even great-grandson. Dogs can pass down distinctive features through generations. But the real mystery is how he found you. As if understanding they were talking about him, Charlie lifted his head from Emma's lap and gave a soft woof. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Charlie, or Charlie Jr., as some of the townspeople started calling him, became a fixture at Sweet Memories. Emma set up a bed for him behind the counter, though he preferred to follow her around as she worked, just like his namesake used to do. Customers were drawn to his gentle presence, and soon the story of his mysterious appearance spread throughout town. Some called it coincidence, others a miracle. Emma wasn't sure what to believe, but she knew one thing: having Charlie in her life again, even if he wasn't the original, had awakened something in her she thought she had lost forever. One morning, about a month after Charlie's arrival, Emma was going through some old papers when she found something that made her gasp. It was a letter she had received shortly after moving to Millbrook, one she had never opened in her grief. The return address was from a Boston animal shelter. With trembling fingers, she opened the yellowed envelope. Dear Ms. Patterson, we are writing regarding your missing dog, Charlie. A golden retriever mix matching his description was brought to our shelter on January 15, 1990. Unfortunately, due to the severe weather conditions and overwhelming number of strays during that period, we were unable to hold him beyond the required waiting period. He was adopted by a family moving to Western Massachusetts. We apologize for the delay in this notification, as our records were severely damaged in a flooding incident. Emma sat down hard, Charlie immediately pressing against her leg in concern. The pieces started falling into place. The original Charlie hadn't been lost forever. He had been adopted by another family, possibly living out his life not far from where she had relocated. And somehow, through whatever mysterious ways dogs pass down their memories and instincts, his descendants had never forgotten. That evening, as Emma closed up the bakery with Charlie dozing contentedly nearby, she felt a peace she hadn't known in decades. The weight of guilt she had carried for so long began to lift. Perhaps some bonds were truly unbreakable, spanning generations and defying explanation. She knelt beside Charlie, scratching behind his ears just like she used to do with his grandfather. You found me, she whispered. After all this time, you found me. Charlie opened one eye, fixing her with that familiar amber gaze, and thumped his tail against the floor. In that moment, Emma knew that while she might never understand exactly how this miracle had occurred, it didn't matter. Love, in all its forms, had a way of coming full circle. Word of Charlie's story spread beyond Millbrook, attracting attention from dog lovers and believers in serendipity alike. A local journalist wrote a feature that went viral, leading to television interviews and even talks of a book deal. But Emma wasn't interested in fame or publicity. She had everything she needed: her bakery, her memories, and most importantly, a second chance at healing old wounds. Charlie became known as the town's good luck charm. Children would stop by after school to share their secrets with him, and he seemed to have a special way of knowing when someone needed comfort. Emma noticed that he paid particular attention to elderly customers who came in alone, often resting his head on their laps as they enjoyed their coffee and pastries. As the seasons changed, Emma watched Charlie grow stronger and more confident. The limp gradually improved with proper care and medication, and his fur, though still gray, took on a healthy shine. Dr. Chen continued to marvel at his resilience, noting that he seemed to be defying the odds with every passing month. 1 year to the day after Charlie first appeared at her door, Emma hosted a special celebration at the bakery. She had developed a new treat, Charlie's Chances, she called them, golden-colored dog biscuits made with peanut butter and honey. For every bag sold, she donated a portion to the local animal shelter, helping other strays find their way home. During the celebration, Mrs. Henderson approached Emma with tears in her eyes. You know, she said, watching Charlie accept gentle pats from a group of admiring children. I never told you this, but I lost my Thomas, my husband, the same year you lost your Charlie. For the longest time, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But seeing you and Charlie together, how you both got a second chance, it gives me hope, Emma. It reminds me that love doesn't ever really leave us. It just finds new ways to come back. Emma hugged her friend, understanding completely. Sometimes, she replied, the best things in life come back to us in ways we never expect. That night, as Emma prepared to close up shop, she found Charlie sitting by the window, staring out at the street where he had first appeared. The scene was so similar to that foggy morning a year ago, yet everything had changed. She sat down beside him, running her hand along his back. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me. For helping me remember that it's never too late for forgiveness, especially forgiving yourself." Charlie turned to look at her, and in his amber eyes, so like his grandfather's, she saw not just the ghost of her past, but the promise of her future. He had brought her more than just companionship. He had brought her closure, healing, and a reminder that some bonds transcend time itself. As they walked home together through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Emma realized that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles come disguised as ordinary moments. A stray dog searching for crumbs, a long-forgotten letter, a second chance at love. And in the end, isn't that what we're all searching for? Not just crumbs of happiness, but the whole feast of joy that comes from being found, being forgiven, and being loved unconditionally. Charlie woofed softly, as if in agreement, and Emma smiled. The past might be unchangeable, but the future, with all its unexpected twists and turns, was still full of possibilities. And sometimes, just sometimes, it brings us exactly what we need, even if we didn't know we were looking for it.